This is the Valley Labor Report with your hosts, Jacob Morrison and David Story, on Sunday, April 12th, 2020. We're going to go right into the headlines. So Alabama is currently at 2,383 confirmed cases of the coronavirus and 78 deaths. In the United States, we just passed 549,000 cases with nearly 22,000 deaths. We talked about people comparing the coronavirus to the swine flu last month. And so this puts us at nearly double the deaths of the swine flu, and 1% of the infections. The swine flu infected 55 million people and only killed 12,000. The coronavirus has just passed 500,000 cases and has already killed almost double what the swine flu did. So,
Yeah.
you know, the context is important when you see those numbers going around.
Yeah, last week.
Oh, yeah, I said last month. Last week is what I meant.
Yeah. And I think everybody's got to the point where they recognize that this is no joke. It's not the swine flu. It's not, the avian bird flu, the whole 9 yards.
I don't know. I think I've seen some folks, but Trump, it has come out and opposes mail-in ballots in the midst of the coronavirus, but he votes by mail in Florida. That is, there were some reporters that were asking him about that in one of his press conferences, and it was just amazing seeing him trip over himself trying to justify why he can be trusted to vote by mail, but us peasants and, common folk, we're not to be trusted. We would commit voter fraud. We would not be, we wouldn't be good stewards of that responsibility, but he's fine doing it.
The other option is just make Election Day a national holiday, and then we don't have to worry about that any longer. But of course, the last time that was proposed last year, McConnell kind of laughed and said, "Yeah, that's what we need, another national holiday." Well, hell yeah, Mitch McConnell, that is what we need, another national holiday. I mean,
yes, we do need a national holiday, a national holiday for voting, and that's absolutely important. But during something like this, while we need to be social distancing, while we need to be trying to stay away from each other as much as possible, increasing the capacity for that as much as possible is really important. And like in so many states, you just cannot vote by mail unless you are like out of the country or you have some specified reason. You can't just vote by mail because that's what you would rather do. And Trump doesn't think you should be able to do that. He should be able to do that, but you shouldn't be able to do that. And
well, they don't want anybody voting anyways. The fact of the matter is they would much prefer to stay dictatorial.
The more people that vote, the less Republicans get in office. And that's exactly what they're afraid of. And he explicitly said that's what he was afraid of. He said that if we instituted national vote by mail, no Republicans would ever be elected again in this country. I mean, one, obviously that's not true. Obviously Republicans would still get elected, but it just goes to show that the Republican Party is just institutionally opposed to more people voting. Like they don't want more people to vote, because the more people that vote, the less they will get elected. And they've just got structural. They're structurally opposed to it. They don't like democracy. So Mike Hubbard, the former Speaker of the State House of Alabama, was convicted on 6 counts of ethics violations by the Alabama State Supreme Court. I was very surprised to see that. I was very happy to see that.
I like you. I was just overwhelmed whenever I seen that they only threw out 4.
They threw out 5.
5. So I mean, I was like, fair game. I mean, okay. I don't think they deserve to throw out any, to be completely honest with you. But the fact that in our state they only that he still has a possibility of serving a few years in prison was just wonderful news for me.
Yeah, that's very good. He faces 4 years in prison and 16 years of probation after that, and hundreds of thousands of dollars in fines and restitution. And so, like, that's great. There are so many crooked politicians in Montgomery and in DC, and it's just nice to see one of them get what they deserve. But he could see a delay in when he's sent to prison because of the coronavirus. And this is there are silver linings in bad stories, and this is like the bad lining in a good story. It's not bad because, of course, that's, it's a reasonable decision, but it's not a decision that would be made for normal folks. And it's not a decision that's being made for the people that are in prisons right now that shouldn't be. No one in Alabama is talking about releasing nonviolent drug offenders from prison during the coronavirus to slow the spread. No one is talking about releasing prisoners early who were there for petty theft or other nonviolent crimes, letting them go early, like if they're almost finished with their sentence. No one's talking about that. No one's talking about anything that would benefit, normal prisoners. But this guy, because, even though presumably he's going to be sent to prison at some point, but he's still getting special treatment. So that was a bit disheartening to see that.
Well, I mean, I'm still of the opinion he's going to get out of. Maybe my distrust with the system is misplaced, but I don't see him doing any prison time regardless. I truly think that the prison time gets waived. So I don't know, but at the end of the day, I get why they're doing it. I get, the reasoning behind it. I'm not gonna. Anytime they can, during this case, anytime that they can not, move the government along, force people to come in and do things when we should be social distancing, I'm all for it. I recognize that a lot of the Democrats are buying into the whole conspiracy theory behind, the COVID-19 is stopping him from doing it, but I'm good with that. I just hope he does some time.
I said it was disheartening. It's not disheartening that they're taking those steps. It's disheartening that those steps are not and would not be extended to other folks.
Yeah.
That's the not great thing. And here's the last headline. I wanted to spend a little bit of time on this because it is it's representative of so many other things that Republicans and that people that are ideologically opposed to public services do. The United States Postal Service provides an incredibly important public service to all of Americans. They service every single household in the country. No private corporation would do that. That's why they were set up, so that every person would have an avenue of communication for every single other person. And amid the coronavirus, they're facing lots of revenue decreases. A lot of their, people aren't shipping as many packages, people aren't sending as many ads through the mail. A lot of their big revenue getters are decreasing. And so they had requested, along with all these other corporations, all the small businesses and workers who deserve a bailout, definitely, they were requesting a grant as well because they were facing these same issues that these other institutions were. And they were denied by the Trump administration. And it was actually, I was reading on this, apparently a $2 billion grant was put in there for the United States Postal Service in one of the former bailout packages, but the Trump administration said that they would veto that.
Yeah.
If anything in there helped the USPS, and that is just it just does not it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense if your goal is to ensure a good distribution of mail, a good distribution of services. If you want to provide a good service to the American people, it doesn't make sense. It does make sense if what you want to do is privatize all public services and make sure that your wealthy CEO friends at FedEx and UPS get more business. Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah, well, and the it's sickening really, because I recognize this has brought to life the fact that they're hurting for money. But what nobody talks about is the fact that just a few years ago, they forced them to pre-fund, not fund, but pre-fund their pension for all their employees, which means that for any of the USPS workers, they have to 100% fund the pension, which don't even happen. It happens at no private organization in America, but yet they're forced to do it. And that was a Republican trick, to make them hurt even worse several years ago. And now, of course, they're hurting for money. But what private entity can you go pay 2 quarters and a nickel and mail something to Anchorage, Alaska from Key West, Florida? They can talk about privatizing all they want. And Americans, I truly believe Americans get this. The Postal Service is just an integral part of our culture, of our nation, and it's something that needs to continue to be funded. It pays for itself every year, regardless of the talking points.
Right. It pays for itself every year, regardless of the talking points, and regardless of the Republican and conservative attacks on it and sabotaging it year by year by year. You mentioned that they were forced to fund all of their employees' pensions. You said no other private institution does that. That is not a thing that happens.
It's unheard of.
It's unheard of, and Congress arbitrarily put this restriction on the Postal Service. And I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that the Postal Service is not allowed to unilaterally raise the prices of stamps. They have to get congressional approval for that. Yep. Congress is forcing them to run like a business, to run above and beyond what a business would be required to be financially stable, and not allowing them to set their own prices, not allowing them to do anything like that. And they're still running a profit. Yeah, they are still financially stable, and it goes to show the efficacy of well-run and good public services, because after decades and decades of sabotage by ideological opponents of public service, the Postal Service is still running, and still running well.
Yeah, and who's getting the bailout right now? Who got the bailout under the Wall Street in the early thousands, 2010, 2011, 2012? Who got all the bailouts in? Private industry. Who's getting the bailouts now? Private industry. Right. And yet here we are with a public service that they absolutely refuse to help one bit. It's sickening.
Right. Yeah, I believe they asked for $2 billion out of a $2 trillion grant. That's it's like they just wanted a small piece to be able to, to help make their, balance their checkbooks. And the administration is so ideologically opposed to it that they refuse. It just does not make sense. And that's consistent with that ideological position's stance on every private or every public service. That's what they have been doing to the VA. They're chronically underfunding the VA. They're chronically hurting employees at the VA to try to decrease service so that they can gin up these horror stories that are real out of the VA, like long waiting lines, long waiting times for surgeries, bad treatment. And it's like that happens because of the sabotage. It's not because public institutions cannot be run well and are not run well. It's because they're being sabotaged by conservatives in the Republican and the Democratic Party. Frankly, that's something that the right wing of both the parties do, and it's sickening.
It goes back to just what I said. If private industry works so well, if the free market works so well, don't give them a bailout. What do they need a bailout for?
Right.
But we're not going to give a publicly funded agency a bailout that relies on private industry, 100% relies on them for their funds. I mean, screw these guys. It makes me sick to my stomach.
Yeah. It makes me sick to my stomach. And the Postal Service is just such, like you said, it's such an integral piece to the American proposition, and it is well run. It's financially stable. It offers good paying union jobs to people all across the country, and they don't like that.
Not only good paying union jobs with good benefits, with good pension, but it does it cheap. It does it so much cheaper than what any other mailing service will do it for.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you said it. 2 quarters and a nickel gets you a letter anywhere in the country.
Yeah.
That's no one else is going to do that for you. No one else can do that for you because they have to pay their CEOs tens of hundreds of millions of dollars, and the Postal Service doesn't have to do that.
Yep.
And shareholders and these random executives. I mean,
everybody wants a cut.
Yeah, everybody wants a cut, but they don't want to give the workers a cut. Yeah. And Postal Service is giving the workers a cut, and they don't like that.
Well, let's just make an exception there, because UPS does a good job. They really, really. I mean, I know they're brutal when it comes to negotiations, but the Teamsters, they're paid well. They're paid fair. They've got good pensions. They've got health care. They've got a lot of these same things that the United States Postal Service has got. The difference is it goes back to the CEOs. All the upper management and the shareholders have to get a cut out of that. So their prices are quite a bit more than the Postal Service, comparatively speaking. But they do at the bare minimum, at least the folks that's working for UPS, whenever they pull up at the house, I know that they're not struggling,
Right.
So that's a big plus.
That is definitely a big plus, but that's not by the good graces of UPS. That's because of the hard-fought battles and the diligence and dedication of the workers.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
All right. We are going to be having a 4, maybe more part series on what is a union.
Yeah.
We wanted to do this because there, especially in the South, especially in right-to-work states where union membership is really low, there are a lot of people that just have no idea. They have no context for understanding what a union is. They don't know what it is, how you get one, who's in it, what does it do for you. They don't know anything about it. They don't. It sounds silly that maybe to folks that are in the labor movement, that are in unions, but there are legitimately people that I have talked to that just don't know what a union is. They've heard the word, but they have no idea what it is. And so we wanted to create a series that kind of goes through that step by step and just really, breaks it down to the fundamentals because we feel like that's something that will help a lot of people understand what unions are and why they're important. We've got four parts in the series laid out that we want to talk about. The first is, what is a union like mechanically, structurally? What does it look like? The second is, we want to talk a little bit about labor history. Like, why is a union historically? Under what conditions did they arise? How did they arise? What happened? You know, just a little bit of history. I think that's important. It's important to know history so that you can apply that moving forward. The third is, what makes a union work? And what makes a union work presumes that a union works. So we'll be talking about statistics about what a union like financially and in other cases does for workers. We'll be talking, because obviously unions do work. Unions provide much better pay, much better benefits for union workers. And so we'll be talking about some of those statistics, and then we'll be talking about why that is the case. And then the fourth part, we're going to be doing some union myth busting. So not going to be union busting, will be union myth busting. So, you know, there's a lot of things that people hear about unions that are either totally not true, or they're lacking critical context, lots of other stuff. So those are the four parts of the series, and today is the first part. So we're going to be talking about what a union is mechanically and structurally today. We're going to be talking about what it looks like. And David has had decades in the labor movement. He has been in multiple different unions. He's been in multiple different positions in different unions. And so I'm going to be turning I'm going to be turning it over to him for the majority of this, adding a little bit of commentary. But I'm going to be turning it over to him now to talk about, you know, so David, what is a union?
Yep. Good question. And this wasn't rehearsed, so I'm going to, right off the bat, I'm going to put Jacob under some pressure and say, up until the last few years, you weren't a union member. What did you, and I'm doing this out of, to put it in context, because you're a Southern worker. You grew up in the South, predominantly religious South, predominantly conservative South. What was your opinion of unions 5 years ago? If I'd asked you 5 years ago, right around leaving high school, going into college, what is a union? Tell me what you think, because I'm interested, because I sit here every day and I think, why can't we get people to join unions? Because of course I've been in one all my life. It's rare that I get the opportunity to hear from somebody. What is a union to you 5 years ago?
What is a union to me 5 years ago? I would have been one of those people that didn't know. I had heard of unions in history books, like I had heard about labor struggles in my history class. We talked about the Haymarket Affair a little bit. We talked about Eugene Debs and the Pullman strike. But I would have said, I don't know really. If I was being honest, you know, I don't know, maybe senior in high school, I don't know how I not would have tried to BS something, but I legitimately just did not know. I had only heard the word and it didn't really mean anything to me. I didn't really have much of an opinion either way about it, because it just wasn't talked about. Like nobody in my family is in a union currently besides me. And I don't believe anybody in my family has ever been in a union. And so it's just, it wasn't even that I had a negative opinion. It's just I had no opinion. I had no frame of reference. I had never come in contact with anybody that was really that was a union worker or that was passionate about being a union worker. I just had no idea.
Yep. And I think that it would be the typical answer of just about everybody leaving high school, even though all the high school teachers, all the middle school teachers, all the elementary school teachers are in a union in the state of Alabama and across the nation. Most of your younger educated children have no clue, and probably one of those reasons is because we live in the state of Alabama, and the state of Alabama, the legislatures pick the curriculum for those schools. So yeah, nobody has a clue whenever they're coming out of high school what a union is. Plain and simple, a union is a democratic organization of workers. It's just the biggest touching point on that is democratic, because all the union officers, all the union officials, they're all elected. Even whenever you decide to join a union, it's done by election. It's done by majority rule. So it's very democratic, based on the way our nation was originally set up. A lot of times they're in related trades, like the pipe fitters union, or the IBEW, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, the steam fitters. Uh, so they banded together a trade, and a lot of that comes from the early 1900s, whenever they wanted to really raise their level of expertise in a certain field. They started apprenticeship programs, and they really wanted these folks that were a member of their organization to be the most skilled that there was. And that's why, even today you see a lot of people talk about buying union, because it's a quality product, because the folks that are building it are really, really good at what they do. Then you get a lot of so that you got the trades groups. Then you have what they call the industrial unionization, that are kind of organized by industries, like the auto workers. Is a good point. Auto workers has been around since the early 20s with General Motors and Henry Ford, and they kind of banded together, not so much as trade work, but more as general laborers in an industry. And they early on, which I don't want to delve into that, but I'll just say that earlier on, the skilled trades did not want your general laborers recognized in their union, because they looked at them as the folks that really weren't skilled. They couldn't perform work as well as they thought that they should, so they kind of tried to isolate those folks. The machinist union, the ones that I'm a member of, they're an industrial union. They go across all different industries, but mainly they started out, believe it or not, it's easy to believe, because it started out as machinists, highly skilled railroad workers, but then they started branching out into aerospace. Nowadays they do medical, they do a lot of different things. And then lastly, but definitely not leastly, because they've led the movement in some of the worst times ever, you've got your solidarity unions, with your picture behind you with the IWW. Very, very typically strong, militant unionists that they believe in the solidarity. When I say solidarity, I recognize that a lot of people don't understand that word, but the coming together of people with a common mission, and banding together and supporting each other through hard times and through good times. They're really not a trades group, even though there's a lot of the solidarity unions in specific trades, like the Stardust workers and the Burterville workers with IWW. So yeah, that's generally your three, I guess, major structures of the unions. The I guess the biggest difference in solidarity unions and your trade unions and industrial unions is a lot of times they don't seek federal recognitions. They don't look for contracts in the workplace. They're they are very direct action focused. So when they want something, they band together and say, we want uh, $2 an hour raise. They go to the boss. If they don't get it, they walk out. And that's kind of an oversimplification of it, because a lot of times they make several steps up the ladder. It's not generally just a walkout, but uh, they that's the premise of what of their push is. It's just they don't really need government. They don't need politicians. They don't need much outside support in general. They are very independent and very demanding of what they want.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely solidarity unions. A lot of unions in the IWW would be considered solidarity unions, and
Yep.
there's definitely a much heavier focus on collective direct action as a means to achieve wins. It doesn't necessarily preclude fighting for contracts or federal recognition.
Yep.
Like the Burgerville Workers Union has been federally recognized. They won a union election, and they're fighting for a contract right now. But they're, the emphasis is definitely on worker
direct action.
Walking out or doing a work to rule campaign or any other number of direct action by the workers, instead of like filing a grievance, let's say, with the NLRB, or filing an unfair labor practice or something like that, which are processes that are set up to ostensibly, help workers have their complaints be heard. And the solidarity union critique of that is that it's too long and it often doesn't work. And so instead of doing that, let's just go on strike, or let's have an hour walkout, or let's do a work to rule campaign or something else. Instead of going through this long and paperwork process, we have the power, let's just use it.
Yep. And so that's your three typical unions: trade unions, industrial unions, solidarity unions.
We talked about we talked about federal recognition. Could you talk about that a little bit more? What does it take to get federal recognition of as a union?
Yeah. So generally what happens as an organizer goes into a workplace, not physically into a workplace, but virtually into a workplace, speaking with the workers, generally on their own time, off-site. A lot of it's done privately. And basically what not so much the trade unions, because the trade unions are focused specifically on bringing workers in. Very generally unskilled workers come into the IBW or the pipe fitters union, and they have an apprenticeship program. They don't go out looking for workers. Generally, workers come to them because they know they've got good wages, they got good benefits, they got pension plans. They're already recognized under the federal government. The workers go directly into the apprenticeship program, go to work at various locations that they have contracts with. Industrial unions is the one that focus mainly on federal recognition. And what they will do is go in and look for skilled workers already in a specific industry that relates somewhat to their industry. And they'll try to get, typically they'll try to get around 60 to 70% of the workers in that, the wage workers, not the salaried workers, not management, but the waged workers in that industry to sign cards. And what those cards are is a lot of times they're referred to as A cards. They're authorization cards. And what that does is when a worker signs an authorization card, they are authorizing that union to speak on their behalf. And the speaking on their behalf is what they're saying is, we want you to petition the federal government, the National Labor Relations Board, to come in and hold a democratic election. And so at the point that they get, I think the minimum, I believe, is 40%. It may be 33 and a third, but I think it's somewhere in that range. If you can get 30 to 40% of the cards of the entire group signed, then the union will go to the NLRB in the state of Alabama. That's in Birmingham, and they will ask NLRB to come out and do a private election or an anonymous election. And what they'll do is set up a ballot box, generally on site, generally in a break room, a lunch area, something, an open area that all of the employees work in. And the employee will come by and say yay or nay for whether they want the union to represent them or not. If they get 50% of the workers plus one vote, then at that point they have a union. And the biggest thing is it goes back to what we originally talked about. It was democratic organization of workers. At the end of the day, the workers choose whether they want to form a union or not. If 50 plus one want to choose, then at that point they are federally recognized as a union. In other words, they can, the federal government recognizes that they are a member of, if it was a machinist or AFGE or the Teamsters or UAW, any union that they decide that they want to join up with, then at that point they're chartered under that union, under that national union or international union. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
So and so we go on down to the unions in general is a larger part of the labor movement. Most of your unions are affiliated with the AFL-CIO, CLC, the American Federation of Labor. It's
Congress of Industrial Organizations and the Canadian Labor Council.
Yep. They can be affiliated with them. That's kind of what I'm struggling with, because the labor movement, because it is such a democratic movement, it allows every local, every district, every international, the ability to choose what they want to do. So whenever I say most of them are affiliated with the AFL-CIO, CLC, it's up to the individual groups. Several of them are not. The AFL-CIO, CLC makes up one of the numerous parts of the labor movement in general. Then you got the national unions, which we talked about with the machinists, AFGE, Teamsters, steel workers. They just go on and on. Associations that typically choose to affiliate with unions. You've got the districts or regional offices, and this is more of a hierarchical with your national at the top, your districts, regional offices, and it spreads down. And then, of course, as the pyramid comes down, it gets wider and wider. You've got hundreds of local lodges affiliated underneath the national union. And generally, they're also affiliated through a district, but they certainly don't have to be. You'll see a lot of the local lodges or local unions that may make up 5, 6, 7,000 member union, and they've got the support within their own local that they don't really need a district, so they'll affiliate directly with a national union and they'll bypass a district. and all of these, man, it gets very convoluted. But all of these, at the end of the day, when you organize your union in your workplace, you're a local union, and regardless of everything else, you have final say on what happens in your local, and whether you choose to affiliate with a district and things like that is generally voted on democratically. And so what a district does is they're that middle ground between your national or international unions and your locals, and they provide a lot of the administrative support that those folks may not generally have at a local level. A lot of your districts, they call them business agents or business managers or business representatives, and what those folks do is come in and help negotiate your contracts at your local level, where you may not have the support in the local. Most of the time, all of your locals are going to be run by volunteers. So, like myself, like yourself, everything that we do is on a voluntary basis. We're not gaining wages by going out here and organizing workers. So,
right. So you mentioned some of the structures. So we've got your international or national unions, which would be, you mentioned like the Teamsters, like the machinists, and they've got this international organization, and then they've got districts or regions, and then you've got locals. And then separately from that, you've got affiliations of unions, which would be the AFL-CIO, CLC. And they have a national president, and the internationals affiliate with the AFL-CIO, CLC. And so the Teamsters, and are the Teamsters part of the AFL-CIO?
I believe the Teamsters split off a few years ago and formed their own. So
AFGE, RWDSU, the machinists, and any number of others, we're all part of the AFL-CIO. The AFL-CIO, or our international unions, are all part of the international AFL-CIO, CLC. And that affiliation of unions also has regional bodies called central labor councils, and they operate as like just kind of mini versions of the AFL-CIO, CLC. And can you talk a little bit, you talked about what the internationals and the districts do. Can you talk a little bit about what the AFL-CIO does on an international level? Like what, the president of the AFL-CIO is Trumpka, and then talk about what the central labor councils do.
Yeah, so basically the AFL, and we'll get into this a little bit later in a different episode. I didn't really want to talk about this a whole lot because it becomes vastly overwhelming. But the real quick and dirty of it is the AFL-CIO is there because you have the machinists, you have the AFGE, you have the Teamsters, you have IBW, you've got steel workers, you've got all these unions spread out all across the United States and internationally into Canada, and everyone's run democratically and independently. And what the AFL-CIO is there to do is to bridge the gap between all these unions and make sure that we're all pushing for the exact same thing. Now that don't mean exactly we're all pushing for the same wages, the same benefits, but at the political level, what they're trying to do is bring everybody together, use that power of solidarity between everyone, and make those changes in Congress. A good example of that would be the Civil Rights Act. Without the Civil Rights Act, without the AFL-CIO, and without all the unions, we would not have the Civil Rights Act. we wouldn't have the NLRA, the National Labor Relations Act, which allows workers to organize and form unions. So basically what the AFL-CIO is they really have no authority over any unions whatsoever, but what they try to do is bring together all the unions and push for one big, they bring the labor movement together, I guess is the easiest way to explain that. And so, yeah. And I guess while we're talking about that, it probably wouldn't hurt to say a lot of people don't recognize this, but the Civil Rights Act and Dr. King, most of us in the South, we grew up knowing Dr. Martin Luther King, but what a lot of people don't realize is Dr. King was a big proponent of unions, a big proponent of organized labor. When the March to Selma happened and Dr. King was arrested, UAW was the organization that bailed him out to the tune of $160,000. They bailed him out of jail. So, there's always been this thing of equality, and we'll touch on that later as well. You start blurring the lines, and we're trying to keep it with unions, and we'll stick with unions. But I think that's an important point to point out.
It's definitely an important point. The last speech that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. ever gave was in Memphis in support of striking sanitation workers. And everybody knows that he was in Memphis when he died, but nobody knows why he was there. And he was there supporting workers and supporting unions and striking workers. And so, that's definitely an important point. So you talked about how the AFL-CIO internationally kind of functions as trying to offer some like political cohesion to the labor movement. And so that's kind of what the central labor councils do at the regional level. Different regions and different states have central labor councils, and so they try to bring all of the unions together in the area together to push for certain certain issues that are locally resonant. So
and that's one of the biggest, and that's why this whole discussion gets so convoluted as you go across everything, is the fact that your local lodges, your district lodges, your internationals, your AFL-CIO, and all of this brings together such a great group of people that do work that is so dynamic, not just to somebody's pay, that it's difficult to speak about everything without going into a diatribe on civil rights or the women's right to vote or things like that, because they're all hand in hand.
It's definitely all hand in hand, and so we've been talking about the AFL-CIO and these labor affiliations, different labor movement affiliations, and it's just worth mentioning that there are independent unions. Like you can form a union at your workplace and just not affiliate with any international union, not affiliate with the AFL-CIO. That's a thing that you can do. There are also international and national unions that are not affiliated with the AFL-CIO. You mentioned the Teamsters. The UAW is not affiliated with the AFL-CIO anymore. The UAW and a couple other unions are in another labor federation called CTW, Change to Win. They broke off from the AFL-CIO a few years ago. CWA, I found this out the other day, is a member of CTW and the AFL-CIO. Thought that was interesting. The IWW is not a member of CTW or AFL-CIO. They're an independent labor organization. And so, the AFL-CIO definitely makes up most international unions, or a really large part of international unions are affiliated with AFL-CIO. And so, talking about those structures kind of takes care of most of it. But it's just worth mentioning that there are other forms of you don't have to, you can have a union and not be affiliated with any of these other international unions. And there are international unions that are not affiliated with the AFL-CIO. With that, though, we talked about what the AFL-CIO does. We talked about what central labor councils do. We talked about what international unions do and what the districts at the international unions do. We haven't spent a whole lot of time on what the local union does. So, and that's probably the most important thing, because that's most people's, the most that people see out of their union, they see at the local level. They know their local president. They know their stewards. They know their business agents, or whatever it is, whatever the trade unions call those folks. They know the people that are on their collective bargaining committee, and they know their coworkers that are in the local union with them. So what does a local union do day to day to improve the lives of its members?
Yeah, and in hindsight, we probably should have started this with the locals and went up, because it seems like maybe that makes more sense. I guess whenever we originally laid these notes out, I'll take the blame for that. I started at the top and worked our way down because of the way the pyramid works.
Right.
But yeah, at the end of the day, the local lodges, those are the folks that have come together as a group, as a unit, as what we generally refer to as a bargaining unit, because they bargain together for better wages, better benefits, safer working conditions. So yeah, when we organize, that would be the place that we organize. Let's take, for example, a small, let's not do that. Let's just say a local could be one certain business. And when all of those workers are tired of maybe some being forced to work on the weekend, or maybe being forced to stay 2 hours over every day, and they decide they want to form a union, they vote democratically, as we talked about before. They may join a solidarity union as well, where they're not federally recognized, where they just say, you know what, we're fed up with it. We want to all join up with IWW, and they just start becoming members right off the bat, and they are able to work that social networking between themselves. But so it depends on what type of union you want to form, but at the end of the day, they're all basically the same. They're all fighting for better working conditions in that one small area. And the local union is going to have generally a more of a hierarchical sense, kind of like not unlike the U.S. government, where you have a president that's elected. You'll have some representatives that are elected. The biggest thing is everyone is brought out of that bargaining unit. So your buddy, everybody may think he's a great leader. He may be the person that you elect to be president. You'll have bargaining committees. So you elect people from different areas of the plant to go in and bargain with the company on your behalf. Once again, it's democratically elected. The workers choose who they think would best represent their interests. And those smaller groups or committees will go in and sit down and bargain with the company for wages, for health care, for, a big one right now is for paid sick leave, because there's a lot of folks out there right now that during this COVID-19 pandemic, they're saying, I would like to stay home, but I can't stay home and not earn a wage. So paid sick leave is tremendous benefit that you see a lot of the unions. So the local union probably has, it has more impact on the day-to-day lives of all the workers. The one thing to remember is the local union is made up of volunteers. Everybody that's
made up of the workers.
Yeah, everybody that's holding office, they're going to work side by side with you every day. They're not only doing their 40 hours that they're working in the plant, they're representing those workers long past the 40 hours is up. So most of them work hand in hand with uh, if you're affiliated with one of the larger unions, they work hand in hand with the national union, and I think that's where it got kind of convoluted earlier. But that's where your districts, your regional, and your national unions come in, because when you need help fighting for an issue, whether it can be anything. The national has a lot of resources that are available to local unions that local unions won't have. So basically what you've got is somebody that's got your back. Somebody that's going to say, you pick up the phone and you call and say, we are really having a problem with the air quality in this machining area because it's spitting up all kinds of this coolant. It's atomizing it in the air. We're breathing it, and everybody's coming down with respiratory conditions. Of course, a local, you can think of, there's 40, 50, maybe 200 or 300 people even in that area. They don't have the money to pool together and bring in somebody to test the air quality for this type of thing. But you pick up the phone and call the international or your national, they're like, we'll have somebody down there tomorrow. We'll test the air. If the air quality is terrible, then we're going to go in and start demanding this company fix it. So the locals, although they may not have the resources, they are really the first one to react because they've got boots on the ground, but they also have the contacts with the national or international or district offices where they can pick up the phone and get some help quickly.
Yeah, that definitely, you know, that's a lot, you know, that's a lot, but that's what, you know, that's what a union does. A union works for its members. A union is its members. That's, you know, something that folks outside of the labor movement really don't recognize, is that the unions are not this third party in negotiations. It is the workers. You're the president of a local union, but you still go in every day of the week and do your job like everyone else in there. And then on top of that, you're doing this other stuff. It's not, you're not being paid to be president. You're not drawing a wage, like you said, from your members' dues. You are a member, you are a worker, and you are the union. Everybody in the union is the union. And you know, that's something that folks just, they don't understand. They talk about the union as a third party. It's like, no, the union is them. The union is me. The union is us. That's who the union is. And so, you know, of course there are, you know, and so people lob criticisms, or they have these stories about union officials behaving wrong, behaving badly. And you know, the union is the members, and the members are human. So unions are human institutions. And so, of course, there are going to be flaws in unions. There are going to be flawed iterations of the same union, because unions are just made up of people, right? So, you know, we're both dedicated unionists, but we're not like idiots. You know, unions are made of people, and people have flaws. So, you know, of course there are going to be bad things about some unions, or bad people in some unions. But that does not.
Sorry, go ahead.
No. I was just about to wrap up. That doesn't like change the fact that unions are good today, yesterday, and as long as they've been in existence. They have been workers fighting for their rights and their freedoms, for the rights and freedoms of their coworkers, and for the rights and freedoms of people that they don't work with, and succeeding.
Yeah. one of my favorite stories that I tell, because we're all organizers. Every union member, regardless of what you do, even if you're not an elected official, your job is to organize other workers, because the more workers we can bring in, the more power we build, the better off everybody is. But I was on a flight, and I won't say what airline it was, but several years ago, I was on a flight, and I was wearing my Machinist Union logo on my shirt, and the flight attendant comes by, and she's asking for drinks and what have you, and she said, "Machinist Union, huh?" And I said, "Yeah, union proud." She said, "That's the worst union I've ever been a member of." And it really caught me off guard, because I was like, here I am on a union flight, because we try to fly. If I'm flying, if we buy anything, we try to buy union-made goods. We try to fly with union carriers. And I'm like, wow, no kidding. And she said, "That's the worst union I've ever been a member of." And it just within seconds, it dawned on me. I was like, "Were you a member of the union? The Machinist Union?" She said, "Yeah." And I said, well, you recognize that generally your unions are only as good as the members are. So you must not have been a very active member. And that kind of speaks to the fact that you hear a lot of people talk about Uncle Johnny or Cousin Ray or Billy Bob down the road. They were a union member at such and such union, and they didn't do crap for them. And the fact of the matter is, we're all a member of the union, and we are all the union. So when you hear these people talk about the union didn't do crap for them, it's because they didn't do crap for themselves. Because at the end of the day, if you don't have active participation in the union, they're not going to do anything for you, because they are you. Without you wanting to take an active role in your union and get out there and negotiate with the company, then yeah, it's going to fall apart, because it's no different than a church or any other organization. If you got a lot of lackadaisical members, they just want to show up, do their time, go to the house, well, you may as well not even be a union at that point.
Right. That's exactly right. And that's exactly right. And I'm glad you mentioned the thing about the church, because I think that'll speak to a lot of people in Alabama who have been to, a lot of folks have been to multiple different churches, and they've been in multiple different environments. And, just like a union, the church is made up of its members. So, if you're not getting what you need out of the church, the advice is always, and they recognize that this is good advice, the advice is always to, put into it. Like, are you just coming every Sunday and sitting on the back pew, not talking to nobody, and going home as soon as service is over, coming 5 minutes late, not participating in the church cookouts, not participating in anything else that the church does? You're just coming and leaving as soon as it's over. Of course you're not going to get anything out of it. Of course. It's obvious you're not going to get anything out of it. That's any organization. You get out what you put in. So if you go, if you're in a church and you go 15 minutes before church starts, shake hands with the preacher, shake hands with the person you're sitting next to, and talk to them, get to know who they are. You go to the next cookout they have, and you start, you're going to start feeling more fulfilled. You're going to start feeling more like you're a part. You're going to start feeling more like you're their family. And that's the way it is with the union as well.
And not only are you going to feel like, not only are you going to feel like more like you're a part, you're also going to fill that role for the next person that's coming in.
Right.
That same person that was sitting in your seat 6 months ago or 6 months from now, you will be that bridge to get those people involved. Because at the end of the day, if somebody's not doing it, nobody's going to do it.
Right. Right. That's exactly right. There. Somebody's got to do the work, and may as well be you. So,
Yep.
All right.
So,
well, I think,
we're pretty
I
well
think
wrapped up.
Yeah, I think that gets us through. We talked about the headlines. We talked about unions. international unions, district level, local level. We talked about the AFL-CIO and other labor federations, and then we talked about those at the regional level. We talked about what a union does, but what a union local does day to day, and how you are the union, the members are the union, the workers are the union. I think I got everything off my chest. Is there anything else you wanted to add to that, David?
You know, I would just say, you know, that was a very detailed. We painted with a broad brush, so there's probably a lot of questions. Maybe if somebody's watching this show and they've watched it all the way through to the end, they probably still got some questions. So, you know, you could message us, message the show, post questions.
Leave a comment on YouTube.
Yeah, leave a comment on YouTube, leave a comment on Facebook, on Twitter. You know, just because we go through all this, we understand that there's still a whole lot of questions to be answered. We're more than willing to answer those questions after the shows anytime you want. So I just say, I'm sure there's more questions, post them. We'll answer them. We'll answer them as detailed as possible.
Right. And, you know, the series, you know, what is the union? Like, if we wanted to give, there's just no way that we could answer all of the questions that people have in one, like an hour. You know, that's we've broken it up into 4 parts initially, and I've already started ruminating on a 5th part. And so, you know, there's just so much, like any other institution, like any other group of institutions, you know, there's so much to learn, and there's so much to talk about and to dissect, and so, you know, it's going to take a little bit, but absolutely, if you've got some, you know, if you've got questions and we don't have it planned to address that in one of the later installations, then we definitely want to answer that. So comment, you know, leave us a question, all that good stuff.
Yeah.
All right. So that wraps up the broadcast for today, for April 12th. Like we said, leave a comment, like, and subscribe to our YouTube page. We are still trying to get advertisers and get funds to be on the radio beginning in May. We have been getting some more advertisers, so it's looking like we're getting in better shape right now, but we still need some help. So throw us a couple of bucks a month on Patreon at patreon.com/The Valley Labor Report. And thank you very much for watching.